Current government regulations require about $98 billion to be on the books of our banks. We have a little more than that. We have $2.4 trillion in excess of our reserves. I think that's a lot of money. You could do a lot of work with that money if that money got invested into businesses. What does that mean in terms of scale? It's about 2/3 of the entire federal budget. That is a lot of money just sitting there, just like it did in the Great Depression. But where do banks have their money? Maybe their money's already tied up in risky business ventures. They don't want any more. Is that the case? No, that's also not the case. This is a graph of business loans and consumer loans. I checked this 16 different ways. I couldn't believe it when I saw this. That right now, consumer debt is around $3.5 trillion, and this is business loans. This is like negligible. It's like a few $100 billion. 97% less. I don't know about you, but this is not how capitalism is supposed to work. Those are supposed to be flip-flopped. That's how economies grow. They don't grow through consumer debt. But if you're curious about how this happened, there's a book that I wrote called Borrow that I can tell you about how that happened. But basically, the idea is that it became much easier to securitize all this consumer debt, to bundle it up and sell it on capital markets, than it is for business debt. In fact, it's not possible really to do that now. And in fact, our largest government agency that's supposed to be in charge of doing this, doing what we imagined, what the Reconstruction Finance Corporation did in the 1930s, the Small Business Administration, does hardly any of it. So $15 billion. This is like a drop in the bucket compared to either the size of banks or even the entire market for small business loans if you include real estate. Why is this? It's because we had government policies in the 1960s and 70s that made it possible to securitize consumer debt, to make it easier for banks and lenders and investors to put money into your credit cards than into your small business, than into even your large business. And this is from a report from the Federal Reserve, a report to Congress, why it's not possible to do this. Now, I think if it's possible to hide Greek debt by Goldman Sachs, if it's possible for all those wizards of Wall Street to do all the magic they do every day, we can probably do for small business debt what we did for houses in Texas in the 1930s, before they had computers or, anything, really. They were just primitive, cavemen. It's in Texas. That's point one. Point two, it would not fix the new leading sector. How do we find this new leading sector? For instance, we're all excited about self-driving cars. Who's excited about self-driving cars? I'm excited about self-driving cars. I hate driving. I like sleeping and reading. Now, this will create a lot of demand. I'm very excited. This is a good thing. It'll create a lot of demand, though, not just for the cars, the replacement of all our cars, but also the rebuilding of our cities, the rebuilding of our entire built environment around these cars, a lot of connections, a lot of growth. This is the kind of thing that could be part of a new leading sector. It is the right direction. Now, the other thing I want to talk about with that is that sounded crazy how many years ago? 2? 3 years ago? If I was here 5 years ago and I was like, hey, I'm going to get a self-driving car, you're like, yeah, good luck with your Rocketboots. And yet it's possible. It's a failure of imagination. In fact, we see this all the time in our society, a failure of imagination, which stems from a basic failure of science, which I'm going to come back to. We live in an era that is not disruptive, but incrementalist. Bear with me. Most of the science we build our technology on, the basic scientific principles, electricity, quantum mechanics, have resulted in products that have been refined since the 1960s, since the 1950s even, in a lot of ways. Incrementalist. This room basically would look the same 50 years ago. Whereas 50 years before that, none of it would exist. We think we live in a time of technological change, but it's actually relatively slow. Because we have cut off imagination and we've cut off innovative science. Now, a good test of what a new leading sector would be, does it sound as crazy as a self-driving car? What are some of the kinds of crazy things you could imagine in the future? I named Rocketboots. Those sound totally insane. I want to point out one thing that also sounded, 10 years ago, when I was talking about this with my wife and we were in grad school, I was like, self-driving cars and space elevators. Space elevators, right? Those sound crazy, right? Yeah, a big strip of material into space with an elevator attached? That's ludicrous. But imagine what it would be like. It's the right order of thinking. Something totally, totally new. A platform for other industries, radical new material science, and most importantly, millions and millions of jobs as a platform for new possibilities. And again, I am not an industrialist. I am not a scientist even, so I have no stake in this. If this happens, I will not make any money. I will not even be allowed in space because my wife thinks I'm going to die there. Okay.